Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome everyone to this explainer on what is, quite possibly, television's greatest moral gray area. We're going to deconstruct a storyline that is so fascinating and honestly so layered that people are literally still arguing about it nearly 30 years later. I'm talking about a moment in pop culture that perfectly mirrors our own everyday struggles with communication, trust, and relationships.
I mean, just imagine a single sentence powerful enough to divide millions of fans for almost 3 decades. Just one line, three little words, on a break. It's the debate that refuses to die. Were Ross and Rachel actually broken up? Or did Ross betray the person he loved just a few hours after a fight? Well, by the end of this explainer, you'll see exactly why the writers never gave us a simple answer to that question. Section 1, the build-up to heartbreak. So to really grasp this whole shebang, we've got to rewind all the way back to season 3. Fans had waited years for this couple to finally get together, right? But as often happens, once the thrill of the chase faded, reality hit hard, and their lives really started going in different directions. Rachel had just started a brand new career in fashion. She's working crazy long hours, building something for herself, and becoming incredibly independent. Meanwhile, Ross is struggling. And we have to impartially look at why. He was carrying some incredibly deep scars from his past. His ex-wife, Carol, had cheated on him with Susan. So when Rachel forms a close friendship with her new coworker, Mark, it triggers all of Ross's past trauma. His insecurity totally escalates into jealousy. He starts sending extravagant gifts, interrupting her work, and questioning Mark's intentions, which obviously leaves Rachel feeling completely suffocated. Ultimately, this mounting tension leads right to an explosive argument. Now, right in the middle of that huge fight about Mark and Rachel's demanding schedule, she drops the famous line. But listen really closely to her exact wording here. She doesn't say, "We're broken up." She doesn't say, "It's over." She specifically says, "Maybe we should just take a break." It's incredibly ambiguous, and man, that ambiguity is the exact match that lights this entire fire. Section 2. Two completely different realities. Because right after Ross storms out of the apartment upset, the night takes a crazy sharp turn, and it all hinges on one single phone call that changes absolutely everything. Later that evening, he calls Rachel, hoping to talk things out. But when she answers, he hears Mark's voice in the background. In that exact second, this one night completely fractures into two totally different realities. So let's look at Ross's point of view first. For him, his absolute worst nightmare has just come true. The exact guy he'd been so worried about is suddenly hanging out in Rachel's apartment on the very night they decided to take a break. Ross instantly assumes the relationship is 100% over. Feeling completely crushed, emotional, and angry, he hits up a nightclub with Chandler and Joey. And, well, in his extreme vulnerability, he meets Chloe, the copy girl, and after a night of heavy drinking, he sleeps with her. But now, contrast that with Rachel's reality. From her perspective, Mark merely came over as a friend because he heard she was upset. She had absolutely zero romantic intentions toward him whatsoever. In fact, her whole plan was just to cool down and work things out with Ross the very next morning, which, of course, sets up this incredibly tragic revelation when morning actually rolls around. She goes to reconcile only to discover what Ross just did. Section 3. Technicalities versus emotional trust. This whole clash is basically the perfect collision between a strict, legalistic defense and a deeply emotional one. Look, objectively speaking, Ross's technical argument is incredibly strong. Step 1, Rachel is the one who actually suggested the break. Step 2, hearing Mark's voice confirmed the end in Ross's mind. And step 3, he genuinely believed there was no relationship left to cheat on. So, legally speaking, he probably didn't do anything wrong. And, a lot of fans firmly plant their flag right there. But let me pose this question directly to you. Put yourself in Rachel's shoes for a second. Even if your partner says, "Hey, maybe we should take some space," how would you feel if they slept with someone else literally just a few hours later? It's a total gut punch, right? Rachel's argument really isn't about technicalities at all. It's about timing, trust, and emotional responsibility. And this brilliantly illustrates the core of Rachel's pain. To her, Ross's actions communicated something devastating. It basically meant that he either moved on incredibly fast or he was just way more willing to let the relationship go than she ever realized. So even if they were technically on a break, the emotional betrayal she felt was entirely real and utterly crushing. Section 4. The psychology of miscommunication. If we pivot away from the sitcom drama for just a second, we actually uncover some brilliant underlying psychology here. It's something universally relatable to pretty much anyone who has ever been in a relationship. It all comes down to a concept called emotional assumptions. This is when we believe other people completely understand our expectations without us actually communicating those expectations clearly. It's a trap we all fall into, and it is exactly what doomed Ross and Rachel that night. In practice, these assumptions are a total disaster. Rachel assumed that a break meant taking some time apart to think and just cool off. Ross, on the other hand, assumed that a break meant the relationship was permanently over. Neither of them actually took a moment to define the rules to the other person. They used the exact same words, but they were speaking two entirely different languages.
Think about your own life for a minute. How many arguments begin because two people think they're having the exact same conversation when they're actually living in completely different versions of it? This explainer really hits on something deeply human. Everyday love isn't usually destroyed by comic book Dylans, right? It is damaged by everyday misunderstandings, unchecked insecurities, and just poor communication.
Section 5. The provocative conclusion.
Even the show's creators ultimately realized how unanswerable this whole thing was, and they turned it into this massive running joke in later seasons. Cast members like David Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston openly acknowledge that there is no definitive answer here. So, the crucial point is this. If you focus solely on the definitions, Ross was absolutely on a break. But if you focus on the emotions, Rachel had every single reason to feel deeply betrayed. Both of these conflicting truths can and absolutely do exist simultaneously. You know, the real tragedy here isn't that one person was entirely right and the other was some villain. It's that neither was entirely wrong. It's that two people who loved each other deeply simply couldn't agree on what three little words actually meant. So this 30-year debate isn't really about Ross and Rachel anymore. It's a mirror. It forces us to look at how we communicate and how we might carry our own old wounds right into new relationships. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time someone asks you whose side you're on, maybe the question shouldn't be, were they on a break? Maybe the real question we should be asking, both of them and of ourselves in our own relationships, is this: why didn't they just talk about what a break actually meant? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it gives you a fascinating new lens for your own communication.